Okay, now we have something called complex rational expressions. That just means you have fractions inside of fractions. So what you want to do is multiply by some really special form of 1. That special form of 1 will be your least common denominator between all the fractions. Now remember, this one's like h over 1, okay? So our common denominator will just be these two. You need an x and you need an x plus h. And remember, whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So what I'm going to do is multiply this times each one of these. 1 over x plus h times x plus h over 1. Well, these go away, and I'm just left with x, right? So when I multiply this by this, I end up with just x minus. I multiply all this by this one, the x's go away. So I'm left with 1 times x plus h. Now I multiply this one. Well, when I do that, I just have h times all that stuff. So h times x plus h. Okay, let's clean it up a little bit by distributing the negative 1. So we'll have x minus x plus h all over h x plus h. Well, x minus x is 0, so I'm left with h all over hx times x plus h. Well, these are all multiplied. Here's an h over an h. These will reduce to 1. So you're left with 1 over x times x plus h. Okay, don't forget what negative exponents mean. Negative exponents are another way of saying get the reciprocal or make it a fraction. So this is really the same thing as 1 over x minus 1 over y all over 1 over x squared minus 1 over y squared. So you need to figure out what your common denominator is between all of these little fractions. That common denominator will be x squared, y squared, because you need the most of each of those denominators. So you multiply by x squared, y squared. When you multiply this one, 1 over x times x squared, y squared over 1, this x will reduce with one of those. So you're just left with xy squared. Okay, so we'll have xy squared minus. Then you multiply these two. Well, this y will reduce with one of those, so you're left with x squared y. And in the denominator, when you multiply these two, the x squares go away, so you're just left with the y squared. And when you multiply these two, the y squares go away, so you're left with an x squared. In the numerator, you have a common factor of xy. If you factor out an xy, you'll be left with y minus x. In the denominator, you have difference of squares. You can factor that into y plus x, y minus x. Now you can see that your y minus x's can be reduced. You're left with xy over y plus x. You could also write that as x plus y if you want to put it in alphabetical order.